This is 88.7 FM WHCL out of Clinton, New York.
I'm Rachel, and I voted on Tuesday, November 8th.
And I'm Kate, and I also voted this last Tuesday, November 8th.
And you're listening to the post-election episode of Liberal Arts and Crafts.
Rachel, you haven't voted before. This is your first time.
Well, now I have.
Okay, true.
But no, this was my first time voting in a presidential election.
That's
which felt
so exciting.
So good.
It's really fun.
Yeah, I thought it was yours too, but that's actually a lie.
I voted in the last election. I did. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. Although I do believe it though, because you're like old for our grade and I am very young for our grade.
I'm old and wise, Rachel. You forgot the wise.
Definitely wise. I'm a senior in college and I'm still only 20. So do with that information what you will.
And I'm a senior in college and I'm already 22. So.
Yeah. I'm feeling 22. Okay, I'll stop. But anyway, we voted for the first female president this past week.
Female presidential candidate.
Presidential candidate, yes.
I also voted for it was the re-election of Barack Obama. But I technically voted for the first African-American president and the first female candidate for president. So I feel pretty good about that. I feel kind of historic.
Yeah, you should. You should feel lucky that you weren't living like 20, 30 plus years like back from now just voting for all these white men one after another. Boom, boom,
I have yet to vote for a white man for president.
Hey, what's up? Okay, so...
We love you too, white men. My apologies.
So I think regardless of your political beliefs, we can still agree that there's been a huge rift in this country that's emerged since the election results came out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly like Rachel said, regardless of which camp you stand in, it's been very surprising in a lot of ways. I mean, I bet people who voted either way were very shocked with the results of the election.
Yeah, I think part of what made this election so interesting was the fact that it was very much a moral election as well as a political election. So I'm hoping now, at least in the aftermath of the election results, we can come together as a country, realizing how deep our rifts actually are.
Yeah, that's really true what you say about it not being, it wasn't as political as usual. I feel like a lot of the issues at stake for people didn't have anything to do with politics. I know some of them did, but most of the people I've seen who are extremely upset about the election, including myself, are more upset about not even the political or the title president. I mean, it's mostly comes down to moral things.
Yeah, and it comes down to who will be affected most by this election. In one of the sermons that we're going to read in this episode, the idea of a natural disaster is put forth, and the idea that some people towards the epicenter are affected more than people on the fringes of where you would feel like an earthquake, so to say. So my heart goes out to all of the marginalized groups that will feel the results of this election so much harsher than I think most of the people at Hamilton will, who feel a bit distanced from the election.
Yeah. I saw an interesting result that white women voted a lot for Trump.
Yeah, I think something like 55% of college-educated white women voted for Trump.
That's amazing. It's shocking to me because we live in a bubble here at Hamilton, but it makes me honestly feel a little bit guilty that, like, when you talk about this epicenter of a natural disaster, I hate being in the demographic where I feel like responsible in a way, even though it wasn't directly me. It feels, I don't know, I feel uncomfortable with the position that I hold.
Yeah, well,
considering the election won't affect me as much as it will affect a lot of other people who are more towards the quote-unquote epicenter.
Right, and now it's just a question of, with this privilege that you and that I and that a lot of our peers have, what are we going to do with it? And how are we going to try to make good out of what's happened and protect the people who are now very much exposed?
Yeah.
So without getting into the nitty-gritty, Kate and I had an idea last week for our episode. Typically, we pre-record these over the weekend and then play them in the booth on Friday when we broadcast, but we did a live episode this past week. And what we did was we read an amalgamation of poems and quotes, essays, short stories, what have you, that we found uplifting, positive, meaningful, to try to tip the scales in creation's favor. Because if you recall the message of, or the mission statement of our podcast, we're trying to find a balance between stuff that we take in and that we put out, and we've taken in a lot over the past 2 weeks with this election.
Yeah, which comes down to the title or the namesake of our podcast, Liberal Arts and Crafts. So this week we're going to be pushing the liberal arts aside, and which I have literally done, and focusing instead on the crafts. What things have, maybe not us, but other people created that we can share and hopefully bring hope into this new kind of uncomfortable darkness that a lot of us see post-election season. Would you like to start, or would you like me to start, Rachel?
Why don't you start? And also, before we dive right into it, these were all submitted by either the two of us, although that was a minority. Mostly they were submitted by our peers here at Hamilton and also some listeners
Peers beyond. Yes.
Yes. So thank you for your submissions, everyone. We really appreciate it. And these were really, really great to read.
Without further ado, the first poem we'll be reading is called Your Village by Alana Bell. And it was submitted with the intent to focus on our shared responsibility to care for everyone. Once in a village that is burning, because a village is always somewhere burning, and if you do not look because it is not your village, it is still your village. In that village is a hollow child. You drown when he looks at you with his black, black eyes. And if you do not cry because he is not your child, he is still your child. All the animals that could run away have run away. The trapped ones make an orchestra of their hunger. The houses are ruin. Nothing grows in the garden. The grandfather's grave is there, a small stone under the shade of a charred oak. Who will brush off the dead leaves? Who will call his name for morning prayer? Where will they, the ones who slept in this house and ate from this dirt?
Next up, we have a quote from one of my sweet mates, Annalise Curtis. I asked her before our Friday episode if she had any inspirational quotes or poems or stories or anything to give to me, and she said, oh yeah, actually, after the election happened in our EMT group chat, I think it was, on the hour, every hour, they sent each other an inspirational quote to keep their morale up. So I was like, oh, that's great. So she had one right off the bat that she could give to me. So this is a quote from William George Jordan. Plants grow most in the darkest hours preceding dawn. So do human souls. Nature always pays for a brave fight. Sometimes she pays in strengthened moral muscle, sometimes in deepened spiritual insight, sometimes in a broadening, mellowing, sweetening of the fibers of character, but she always pays.
I really like that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, this next poem is called The Peace of Wild Things, and it is by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Wait, I like this so much.
I know.
Oh my gosh. When we were reading this live in the booth, we were having a lot of technical difficulties, so I was kind of not listening very deeply to a lot of them, but I really like the idea behind this.
I like the quote, the day-blind stars waiting with their light.
Ooh, I really like the line before that. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. Mm-hmm. I definitely do that. I definitely anxiously live in the future and what kind of damages it's going to hold for me.
Which is especially how I felt this last week. I think this is really relaxing, and it's a very true poem. I feel like I find a lot of solitude and peace by just relaxing and being outside. Also, speaking of which, the supermoon is tonight.
Whoa, Astro Kate, tell us about the supermoon.
Well, it's going to be past by the time people listen to this, but on Sunday, November 13th, is the biggest moon that's going to occur in like decades and decades. Like last time this happened is like in the 40s, and it's not going to happen for another like 30 years after this. But it's because the Earth is positioned closest to the moon right now, and so the full moon tonight is going to be like the biggest imaginable full moon.
Do you know when the best time is to watch it?
I don't. I think it's like all night though. I don't think it's like an eclipse or shooting stars or something. Anyways, the Piece of Wild Things. Maybe I'll enjoy the Piece of Wild Things tonight.
Yeah, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Next up is a submission from my mom, Sharon Harshaw, a beloved figure in Babbitt 33. All of my friends know about her. So this is a speech given by Ellen DeGeneres on her talk show the Tuesday right before the election. So, I mean, the election was on Tuesday, but she did this earlier in the day before the results were coming in. So this is a little speech that Ellen gave. People have been very passionate about this race. And I think it's because we all love our country, but we just have different ideas about what's best for it, which is part of what makes America great. And I believe we can all come together because if you take away the labels, you realize we're far more alike than we are different. For instance, no matter what your politics are, we all have that feeling of stepping out of the shower and realizing you left the towel completely across the bathroom. And you have to do that shimmy on the bath mat all the way across where you try to get the minimal amount of water, trying to tiptoe like just that one drop of water will be there if I do it that way. We all do that thing where you're pulling into a parking garage and you duck your head just to make sure you make it. It doesn't matter if you're a liberal or if you're a conservative. We've all passed out watching Netflix and woken up not knowing what episode we're on, what season we're on, whose couch we're on. What I'm trying to say is that we have so much in common, our differences actually make us stronger. We need to have the kindness and respect for one another that we all deserve. Here's where I make the exception. The people that leave the shopping carts in the middle of your parking spot. Out of the country. Kick them out of the country. Bring the shopping cart back. Whether you relate more to an elephant or a donkey, I think animals set the best example for how we should all get along. And she then ended her segment with adorable videos of different animal species coming together to play.
That's perfect.
So that is really cute. A little bit of humor, which has not been floating around so much in the past few weeks. So thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Sharon. This next poem is by Anne Sexton, and it is called Courage. It is in the small things we see it. The child's first step, as awesome as an earthquake. The first time you rode a bike, wallowing up the sidewalk. The first spanking when your heart went on a journey all alone. When they called you crybaby, or poor, or fatty, or crazy, and made you into an alien, you drank their acid and concealed it. Later, if you faced the death of bombs and bullets, you did not do it with a banner, you did it with only a hat to cover your heart. You did not fondle the weakness inside you, though it was there. Your courage was a small coal that you kept swallowing. If your buddy saved you and died himself in so doing, then his courage was not courage, it was love. Love as simple as shaving soap. Later, if you have endured a great despair, then you did it alone, getting a transfusion from the fire, picking the scabs off your heart, then wringing it out like a sock. Next, my kinsman, you powdered your sorrow. You gave it a back rub, and then you covered it with a blanket, and after it had slept a while, it woke to the wings of the roses and was transformed. Later, when you face old age and its natural conclusion, your courage will still be shown in the little ways. Each spring will be a sword you'll sharpen. Those you love will live in a fever of love, and you'll bargain with the calendar, and at the last moment, when death opens the back door, you'll put on your carpet slippers and stride out.
Wow.
That was heavy. I almost cried.
Yeah, I almost cried too.
We're okay, listeners. We're okay.
Oh, it's okay. Wow, that was also beautiful. I want to go to the library right now and look up everything written by Anne Sexton ever. Just check it out.
I liked the section about picking scabs off your heart and powdering your sorrow. It was very poignant.
Oh, I really like that, yeah. I feel like that's kind of what I and a lot of my friends did this past week after the election kind of came to an end. We kind of had this big ball of sorrow that we had to deal with, and no one really knows what to do with it. We're all kind of collectively grieving. So the idea of covering it with a blanket and just letting it sleep until it's ready to be transformed in like the form of activism or I don't know, what have you.
Yeah.
I really like that. This next submission is an excerpt from the second Lord of the Rings movie, The Two Towers. Listeners, if you know me at all, I am a huge Lord of the Rings junkie. But in the way that I am a fake yogi, I am also a fake Lord of the Rings junkie because I still haven't read the books. I will, however, let you know that I bought the entire trilogy and it is on my bookshelf at home. And I also have The Hobbit, and it's here with me in Spanish, and I read it sometimes. So
that's all that matters.
That's all that matters, is that I'm working on it. So this is an excerpt of when Frodo starts questioning his resolve to go on this journey with the ring, and Sam tries to talk him out of it.
I love Sam.
Frodo says, "I can't do this, Sam." And Sam replies, "I know. It's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't, because they were holding on to something." And Frodo asks him, "What are we holding on to, Sam?" And Sam replies, "That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." J.R.R. Tolkien.
I love when like your favorite fantasy or fun movies, this goes for like Harry Potter too, have these like very touching moments, or very meta moments, like the time when Dumbledore and Harry are in King's Cross at the very, very end of the last movie. And Dumbledore says, like, just because something's happening in your head, Harry, doesn't mean that it's not real. I was like, oh, this whole series, it hurts.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, all these like cool little moral threads, like just wound through all your favorite childhood stories and movies and stuff. Oh. I see you, Tolkien. I see you Rowling. Rolling. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I think it's Rowling.
All right, this next poem is by Jane Kenyon. It is called Otherwise. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day, just like this day. But one day I know it will be otherwise. Jane Kenyon.
Next up is a poem by the poet June Jordan, who we talked about a lot in my women's studies class last year. And the person who submitted this said that this was specifically a testament to the unflinching strength of those who have stood up to the tyranny before us. This is Poem for South African Women by June Jordan. Our own shadows disappear at the feet of thousands, by the tens of thousands pound the fallow land into new dust that rising like a marvelous pollen will be fertile, even as the first woman whispering imagination to the trees around her made for righteous fruit, from such deliberate defense of life as no other still will claim inferior to any other safety in the world. The whispers, too, they intimate to the inmost ear of every spirit now aroused, they carousing in ferocious affirmation of all peaceable and loving amplitude sound a certainly unbounded heat from a baptismal smoke, where yes, there will be fire. And the babies cease alarm as mothers raising arms and heart high as the stars, so far unseen, nevertheless hurl into the universe a moving force, irreversible as light years, traveling to the open eye. And who will join this standing up? And the ones who stood without sweet company will sing and sing back into the mountains and, if necessary, even under the sea. We are the ones we have been waiting for.
I love that. I have a similarly motivational and empowering one to follow this. In my literary theory class, we've been reading an essay or two by Helene Cixous, and she writes about like feminist literary theory. It's very like her message is always that women need to write, and women need to write in order to create change. And so I pulled some segments of her essay called "The Laugh of the Medusa." I put them in kind of a random order that I enjoyed because I find them to be very empowering and inspiring. And I don't know, I thought about this, especially in voting for a woman president. I really thought about these words. So here they are. Women must write herself, must write about women and bring women to writing from which they have been driven away as violently as from their own bodies, for the same reasons, by the same law, with the same fatal goal. Woman must put herself into the text, as into the world and into history, by her own movement. We the precocious, we the repressed of culture, our lovely mouths gagged with pollen, our wind knocked out of us, we the labyrinths, the ladders, the trampled space, the bevies, we are black and we are beautiful. Body without end, without appendage, without principal parts. If she is a whole, it's a whole composed of parts that are wholes, not simple partial objects, but a moving, limitlessly changing ensemble, a cosmos tirelessly traversed by Eros, an immense astral space not organized around any one sun that's any more of a star than the others. Her libido is cosmic, just as her unconscious is worldwide. For when the phallic period comes to an end, women will have been either annihilated or borne up to the highest and most violent incandescence. I wished that that woman would write and proclaim this unique empire so that other women, other unacknowledged sovereigns might exclaim, I too overflow. My desires have invented new desires. My body knows unheard of songs. Time and again, I too have felt so full of luminous torrents that I could burst with forms much more beautiful than those which are put up in frames and sold for a stinking fortune. I am spacious, singing flesh, on which is grafted no one knows, which I, more or less human, but alive because of transformation.
I am so radically obsessed with this. So I heard you read this a few times before this recording, and every time I just get so excited. There are so many good lines.
There are so many good lines.
Violent incandescence is good. Mm-hmm. I too overflow. When you read that, I was like, yes, I overflow.
I do.
It me.
I like the last line, I am spacious, singing flesh. I don't know why I like that so much.
Also, luminous torrents. This language is so juicy.
I know.
Now I want to go to the library and check out everything written by Helene Cixous. Thanks, Kate. This next poem is by Sheena Poo, I think. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this name right. And the title is Sometimes. Sometimes things don't go, after all, from bad to worse. Some years, muscatel faces down frost. Green thrives. The crops don't fail. Sometimes a man aims high, and all goes well. A people sometimes will step back from war, elect an honest man, decide they care enough, that they can't leave some stranger poor. Some men become what they were born for. Sometimes our best efforts do not go amiss. Sometimes we do as we meant to. The sun will sometimes melt a field of sorrow that seemed hard frozen. May it happen for you.
I was impressed by your pronunciation of muscadel.
Muscadel. I'm not sure what that means, so don't be too impressed.
No, I just read it as like not English. I read that as muscadel. I was like,
muscadel.
I'm illiterate. Okay. This next passage is a portion of a sermon by Galen Gungerich. I hope I pronounced that right. So Jenna Crawford, our friend, spoke this aloud at an all-beliefs union dinner that we both went to. And so we chose some portions of the sermon because they seemed very fitting. It was originally given in New York City on May 3rd, 2015, in response to other tragic events that had happened, which were...
It was a devastating earthquake in Nepal and also the death of Freddie Gray in
Oh, it was
Baltimore.
Freddie Gray.
So it was
Yeah.
this kind of joint travesty.
So we thought that this, or Jenna thought that this actually applied very nicely to how a lot of people have been feeling now. It is called Despite Everything. A devastating earthquake reminds us of the tenuous place we occupy in the order of things. The natural world does not endorse our preference for human life over other forces of nature, be it an earthquake or a cancer. Natural evil often brings out the best in human beings as we rally to defend each other from powers greater than ourselves. Moral evil, on the other hand, expresses what is worst in human beings. Unlike natural evil, moral evil is caused by willful human actions such as murder, rape, genocide. Moral evil encompasses the kind of human actions that need never happen at all. We can't envision our world ever being free of earthquakes, fierce storms, and withering droughts, but we can imagine a world where young black men never die in the hands of the police, where girls and women are never raped by gangs of men, and where genocidal tyrants never massacre their citizens. Some people believe that behind every evil act lurks an evil spirit causing it. In the Christian tradition, this malicious presence has been named Satan or Lucifer. The devil made me do it, we sometimes hear people say, only partly in jest. Human history in this scenario is merely a backdrop for a cosmic battle between God and Satan. For my part, I don't believe in this script or these protagonists. Human beings are not playthings, neither playthings of Satan nor playthings of God. And I don't believe evil is a separate reality from good. It is not a power of equal force and standing, rather evil is the absence of what is good. This is called the theory of privation by those who spend their lives labeling such things. Evil is simply, and sometimes horribly, the absence of good. Even so, evil seems pervasively present in our world today, in both its natural and moral forms. The absence of good can be hard to countenance. It's hard to know how to react, especially when we feel overwhelmed and powerless. In a poem titled A Brief for the Defense, the poet Jack Gilbert, who died 3 years ago, suggests how we might respond. He writes, "Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they are starving somewhere else, with flies in their nostrils, but we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future, smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is very sick. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. If we deny our happiness, the poet says, if we resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We must admit that there will be music despite everything. The battle between good and evil plays itself out, not between cosmic deities, but among human beings here on earth. We do our part by confronting what is evil and by celebrating what is good. Unless we risk delight, we will not have the vision and the energy to defend against forces that perpetrate human suffering. Despite everything, we must embrace gladness and laughter and music. If you can, take a walk in the park this afternoon and see what's blooming. Have lunch with a friend. Buy yourself some flowers. Come to the concert this afternoon. Risk delight, whatever delight means to you. It won't rebuild Nepal or restore Freddie Gray, but it will revive your spirit and renew your resolve to do the work that is yours to do. I close with an admonition by the early 20th century American poet Sarah Teasdale, who was awarded the first ever Pulitzer Prize for poetry. In her poem titled Barter, she writes, "Life has loveliness to sell, all beautiful and splendid things, blue waves whitened on a cliff, soaring fire that sways and sings, and children's faces looking up, holding wonder like a cup. Life has loveliness to sell, As music, like a curve of gold, scent of pine trees in the rain, eyes that love you, arms that hold, and for your spirit's still delight, holy thoughts that star the night. Spend all you have for loveliness. Buy and never count the cost. For one singing hour of peace, count a year of strife well lost. And for a breath of ecstasy, give all you have been or could be.
That was long, but very good.
It was very long. That was only part of it, too.
Yes, that's only a short segment of this whole sermon.
Yeah. I really loved that poem at the end.
The image of children's faces looking up, holding wonder like a cup.
I know.
Oh, I could picture that so clearly.
I know. It was really good.
Yeah.
I really like this message, too. Sometimes I feel like guilty or that I shouldn't be happy in face of terrible things that have happened, or especially this week after the election. I kind of thought that it wasn't fair for me to be happy about anything.
Yeah, no, I felt that too. We must risk delight really hit me. After the election, actually, I was going to host a reunion for my Hogwarts classroom this past Friday. But after the election, I was so close to texting my co-leader of the classroom and being like, well, obviously, we can't do this party anymore. Like, I can't, force all of us to be happy. But then I saw one of my kids the next day, and I was like, oh, he was like, oh, I'll see you on Friday. And I was like, I don't know. I was kind of thinking, like, should I still do that? And he was like, yeah, of course. Like, you're still allowed to have good things. There should be good things. Like, if anything, it should happen now more than ever. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
That's really true. People kept asking me, well, this is on Wednesday, though, so very different. But on Wednesday, I would walk around, and people would be like, hey, how's you doing? How's your day? And I would just, glare at them and, blink slowly. Which I think is fair if you're, grieving or sad. But also, there has to come a point where you realize that, you need to embrace good things, like reunions and parties and things.
Yeah, going back to Anne Sexton, just tucking your sorrow into bed. I believe it was Anne Sexton who wrote that. Yeah, tucking your sorrow into bed and waiting for it to bloom into, rose wings or whatever.
Yeah,
so
I loved that.
Yeah. Risk delight. There are so many things that we've read so far that I just want to print out and plaster on the walls of my room.
Let's anonymously go spread them throughout campus, reminding people, risk delight, tuck your sorrow into bed.
Well, it's not going to be anonymous now that you gave it away, Kate. It's pretty poor foresight.
Such a good vision. Wasted.
Listeners, if you see any anonymous pieces of paper with any poems on them around campus, don't tell anyone that it was us. Let's keep this secret, okay? Next up is one of my submissions, and this is a love poem by the incredible poet Pablo Neruda that many of you have probably heard of. He is a Chilean poet and used to be a diplomat, actually. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1971, and this is kind of not along the lines of the theme that we've been going for so far, and that this is a love poem, but it's just very beautiful and wide and deep in its message, and I think it's a really pure and vivid thing to hold on to. So this is called Alliance, and I'm reading the English translation. Neither the heart cut by a sliver of glass in a wasteland of thorns, nor the atrocious waters seen in the corners of certain houses, waters like eyelids and eyes, could hold your waist in my hands when my heart lifts its oak trees toward your unbreakable thread of snow. Night sugar, spirit of crowns, redeemed human blood, your kisses banish me, and a surge of water with remnants of the sea strikes the silences that wait for you, surrounding the worn-out chairs, wearing doors away. Nights with bright pivots, departure, matter, uniquely voice, uniquely naked each day. Upon your breasts of still current, upon your legs of harshness and water, upon the permanence and pride of your naked hair, I want to lie, my love, the tears now cast into the raucous basket where they gather. I want to lie, my love, alone with a syllable of destroyed silver, alone with a tip of your snowy breast. It is not now possible, at times, to win except by falling. It is not now possible, between two people, to tremble, to touch the river's flower. Man fibers come like needles, transactions, fragments, families of repulsive coral, tempests and hard passages through carpets of winter. Between lips and lips there are cities of great ash and moist crest, drops of when and how, indefinite traffic. between lips and lips, as if along a coast of sand and glass, the wind passes. That is why you are endless. Gather me up as if you were all solemnity, all nocturnal like a zone, until you merge with the lines of time. Advance in sweetness. Come to my side until the digital leaves of the violins have become silent, until the moss takes root in the thunder, until from the throbbing of hand in hand, the roots come down.
That was beautiful. I can't say I understood all of it, but it was beautiful. The digital leaves of the violins. The imagery is so interesting.
That line I'm just very confused by, but I also really like it, so no judgment, Neruda. No judgment.
I loved all of it.
If you ever come to my room, I have a tiny book of love poems by Pablo Neruda that Emily gave to me, who was one of our roommates freshman year in our sixth poll. So if you ever want to come read some romantic words, you can.
Are they in Spanish?
There's side-by-side Spanish with the English translation.
Oh, let's go.
So,
I'll be there. I'll be there.
All right, it's a date.
Next is a quote by Italo Calvino. I want to know that's how you pronounce it. It's a quote from Invisible Cities, and I'm pretty sure that Haley Goodrich submitted this one. But when she submitted this quote, she wrote that this is a reminder of the daily choice that we have when we're getting out of bed between apathy and action. So, without further ado, think about that. The inferno of the living is not something that will be. If there is one, it is what is already here. The inferno where we live every day that we form by being together. There are two ways to escape suffering it. The first is easy for many. Accept the inferno and become such a part of it that you can no longer see it. The second is risky and demands constant vigilance and apprehension. Seek and learn to recognize who and what, in the midst of the inferno, are not inferno. Then make them endure, give them space.
Wow, that was really powerful.
I love the line, okay, I always go to the very end of these quotes, but give them space. This really resonates with a podcast that I listened to by Rob Bell. It's called a Robcast.
The Robcast! I listened to that a little bit this summer.
Yes. He has, I've told you about this before, Rachel, but he has this great one called This Episode is Sugar Free. And it's about when, like, you lose something in your mind, you lose anything, or you try to give up something. You focus intensely on it, and you think that it's the only possible vehicle to joy, the only thing that could make you happy. And you need to, he says, create space in your mind to let yourself think of other joyful, positive things. And this week, all I've thought about is the election. It's been like, oh my gosh, if Hillary is not our president, the world is over. And the world is not over. But at times, we sometimes have a crisis of imagination, and we forget that. We need to give ourselves space.
Exactly. The line in here, when Calvino's talking about the inferno and the people who become a part of it, and he says they become such a part of it that you can no longer see it. That really resonated with me also. Just the feeling of being so swept up and consumed by something that it's become your entire field of vision. There's nothing beyond that. Like, there's no boundary. You're in it, and it is you, and there's, like, no more separation.
I agree.
Which is very dangerous. So, a really good message here. Next is a poem by the one and only Emily Dickinson, short and sweet. The props assist the house until the house is built, and then the props withdraw, and adequate, erect, the house supports itself, and cease to recollect. The augur and the carpenter, just such a retrospect hath the perfected life, a past of plank and nail and slowness. Then the scaffolds drop, affirming it a soul. You know, I think this is talking about when you're building something and you have to build the frame, and then you can take it away. Like, I think, you know, an analogy is when you're drawing something and you draw it in pencil first, and then you color it in, and then you can erase the pencil. So making a foundation and then laying things down, and then you can take that away. So I guess this is talking about the slow build of something.
Also, like, the scaffolds drop, affirming it a soul. Like the moment when something begins to exist on its own without its props. I don't know.
Kind of like us when we leave college, and the prop of college is now gone.
The prop of education. This next poem is by David Budbill. It is called The First Green of Spring. Our walking in the swamp picking cowslip, marsh marigold, the sweet first green of spring. Now sautéed in a pan, melting to a deeper green than ever they were alive, this green, this life. Harbinger of things to come. Now we sit at the table, munching on this message from the dawn, which says we and the world are alive again today, and this is the world's birthday. And even though we know we are growing old, we are dying, we will never be young again. We also know we're still right here, now, today, and my, oh my, don't these greens taste good.
I love his last name, Budbill. That's so fun.
I know.
This also reminds me, this, like, arboretum type language. I don't know. Remember when we found the word muscadel and we weren't sure what it meant? I've looked it up.
Muscadel.
Muscadel, and it is a twist on the word muscatel with a T, and it is a sweet fortified wine made cheaply from muscat grapes.
Muscat grapes.
Muscat grapes. So I think the line was they defy the frost, which would make sense because if you're harvesting grapes for wine, they don't die with the frost. So.
Fair. Okay, so I just thought of this by reading this poem. So I think it said, today, this is the world's birthday, right? That was a line. Mm-hmm. So this reminded me of an E.E. Cummings poem that I'm now going to read. It's very short. But
Plot twist!
Plot twist, adding this in. So this was a song that my choir sang, I think 2 years ago, the Hamilton College Choir. And it is my favorite song I have ever sung in a choir, ever, hands down. It's called I Thank You God for Most This Amazing by E.E. Cummings is the poem, and then it was like modified into a song using the same lyrics. So here it is. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and of wings, and of the gay, great, happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any, lifted from the no of all nothing, human merely being doubt, unimaginable you. Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. E.E. Cummings.
I love that, and I was there when you sang that, and
yes.
It was really beautiful.
Yes. World's birthday, son's birthday. We're back on track. Your programming's back.
No pressure, but can you sing it for the podcast? No, I'm kidding. Next is a different format than anything we've seen so far, and this is an excerpt from an interview that was collected by Haley Goodrich and Meg Riley on their road trip this past summer, which was funded by the Emerson Grant Foundation committee here
scholarship fund.
Scholarship fund. So they were looking at activists and activist burnout, I believe. So this is, Haley said, a very powerful moment that they encountered in one of their interviews this summer that was modified from her Emerson paper. In an interview early on, an informant with a particularly vibrant activist history invoked the powerful words of one Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. The arc of the moral universe is long, he says again and again throughout the civil rights movement, but it bends towards justice. With this one line, Dr. King alludes to both his country's far-reaching history of injustice and to its continuing forward march towards moral restitution. A restitution originally predestined by a 19th century Unitarian minister and staunch abolitionist from Boston, Theodore Parker. Before King made famous the phrase, Parker first introduced the long arc in an 1853 sermon, saying, I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience, but from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice. Outside that unassuming corner cafe in Cambridge, Massachusetts, just miles away from where Parker first spoke of the moral universe to his Boston congregation, a woman with a tireless dedication to justice work of her own appends to King's iconic declaration in Parker's original proffer, a sentiment which speaks to the core of why committed, purposeful, collective action must be our next step. The arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, our informant pauses before adding, but it doesn't bend without our help. The sentiment expressed here is a simple one of action and arbiters, the idea that progress does not happen on its own but requires some doer, some agent through which change must be catalyzed. The arc of the moral universe does not bend without our help. From the Civil War to the height of the Civil Rights Movement to the horrifying reality of a Trump presidency we now face, I am reminded that good people have fought again and again to dismantle injustice, to build a morally sound and equitable future, to move that arc. In the wake of an election that has laid bare the hurt of a nation, I take comfort in knowing that the difficult days ahead cannot negate the fact that every arc touches down somewhere else. Let us carry forth the legacies of Theodore Park, Martin Luther King Jr., and the many others, named and unnamed, who have spent their lives marching, pushing, stampeding towards that other side of the arc. Because now we must be movers.
Very impressed Haley wrote that for her Emerson paper.
Yeah, that is incredibly eloquent, Haley.
Yeah. Next, we have a very small quote by Jane Austen. Did you submit this one?
I did submit this one.
Yes. Ready? I am half suffering, half hope. Jane Austen.
That's it. There it is. It's still good, though.
It is.
Next, we have an E.E. Cummings poem that was actually submitted to us. That was not pulled out of the woodwork by Kate. I do not think there is a title, but I will read it for you. Since feeling is first, who pays any attention to the syntax of things will never wholly kiss you. Wholly to be a fool while spring is in the world. My blood approves, and kisses are a better fate than wisdom. Lady, I swear by all flowers, don't cry. The best gesture of my brain is less than your eyelids' flutter, which says we are for each other. Then laugh, leaning back in my arms, for life's not a paragraph, and death, I think, is no parentheses. E.E. Cummings.
Curious. This next poem is again by Anne Sexton. Our girl.
Ya girl, Anne.
It's called Welcome Morning. There is joy in all. In the hair I brush each morning. In the cannon towel, newly washed, that I rub my body with each morning. In the chapel of eggs I cook each morning. In the outcry from the kettle that heats my coffee each morning. In the spoon and the chair that cry, hello there, Anne, each morning. In the godhead of the table that I set my silver plate cup upon each morning. All this is God, right here in my pea green house, each morning. And I mean, though often forget, to give thanks, to faint down by the kitchen table in a prayer of rejoicing as the holy birds at the kitchen window peck into their marriage of seeds. So while I think of it, let me paint a thank you on my palm for this God, this laughter of the morning, lest it go unspoken. The joy that isn't shared, I've heard, dies young.
I love Anne Sexton. Next up is a letter from father to his daughter, and this was submitted to us by Julia Davis. Shout out to Julia.
Yes, all the way in Iowa.
Yes, who is one of Kate's co-interns at WGBH this past summer, who I once had pizza with in a little green and had really good conversation and Pokemon catching with as well. So
Hashtag Pokemon.
So here it is, a letter from a father to his daughter. Mila. I'm sorry, love, we did not win. And then he draws a frowny face. Don't worry, though, we will fight harder and win the next time. Like people, sometimes a country messes up. But we can help by being ourselves, respectful to others, to our animal friends, and to our environment. Someday, someone with our convictions is going to come along and change the world. Maybe that someone is you. Love, Daddy.
No. This sounds a lot like Seth Meyers was talking about, like, on his show after the election. He was doing this shout out to, like, all the little girls watching. He's like, I hope the first woman president will be you. And then he was like, I hope you're, like, not that young and that you're, like, pretty old. Because I don't want to wait, like, 40 years. All right, this next poem was submitted by Brian Ferguson. Yes? Mm-hmm. Brian. It is called The Tuft of Flowers.
And it is our last poem, and it is a good one.
It is our last one. It is by Robert Frost. Please enjoy. I went to turn the grass once after one, who mowed it in the dew before the sun. The dew was gone that made his blade so keen before I came to view the leveled scene. I looked for him behind an aisle of trees. I listened for his whetstone on the breeze. But he had gone his way, the grass all mown, and I must be, as he had been, alone. As all must be, I said within my heart, whether they work together or apart. But as I said it, swift there passed me by on noiseless wing a wildered butterfly, seeking with memories grown dim o'er night some resting flower of yesterday's delight. And once I marked his flight go round and round as where some flower lay withering on the ground. And then he flew as far as I could see, and then on tremulous wing came back to me. I thought of questions that have no reply, and would have turned to toss the grass to dry. But he turned first, and led my eye to look at a tall tuft of flowers beside a brook. A leaping tongue of bloom the scythe had spared, beside a reedy brook the scythe had bared. I left my place to know them by their name, finding them butterfly weed when I came. The mower in the dew had loved them thus, by leaving them to flourish, not for us, nor yet to draw one thought of ours to him, but from sheer morning gladness at the brim. The butterfly and I had lit upon, nevertheless, a message from the dawn, that made me hear the wakening birds around, and hear his long scythe whispering to the ground, and feel a spirit kindred to my own, so that henceforth I worked no more alone. But glad with him, I worked as with his aid, and weary, sought at noon with him the shade, and dreaming, as it were, held brotherly speech with one whose thought I had not hoped to reach. Men work together, I told him from the heart, whether they work together or apart.
Okay, listeners, so I hope you enjoyed this deviation from our usual outline of our podcast episodes. We really enjoyed reading all of your submissions. I know I have a few new favorites in my poem lexicon.
It makes me want to read more poetry in my spare time.
Yeah, me too. When I was talking to Brian about asking him for submissions, he was like, oh, I have a few. He was hanging out my sleeve.
I have a few.
No, he's like, let me go get some poetry. Went back to his room. He came back with 6 books of poetry and was like, all right, here's one, here's another one. And I was like, whoa.
I need to be more educated. Oh.
Yeah. So thank you all so much, and we hope that this shone a little bit of light into whatever sort of turmoil you or people you know might be going through right now.
Yes, or has given you some food for thought moving forward.
Yes. And with that, we'll bring you to our very special sponsors.
This episode was sponsored by Haley Goodrich.
This episode was also sponsored by Brian Ferguson.
This episode was also sponsored by Annalise Curtis.
And also by Sharon Harshaw. Hi, Mom.
This episode was sponsored by Jenna Crawford.
And was also sponsored by Julia Davis.
And last but not least, this episode was sponsored by Rachel Harshaw.
And by the one and only Kate Bruns.
Lastly, thanks to WHCL.
As always.
Public service announcement. SoundCloud, where we've been uploading all of our episodes, unfortunately only lets you upload 3 hours of audio at a time if you want a free account. So we've decided to only put on SoundCloud our pilot episode and our 2 most recent episodes of Liberal Arts and Crafts.
If you would like to look at our complete archive of all of our episodes, feel free to go to our YouTube channel and type in Liberal Arts and Crafts and see a complete history of all the episodes we've ever recorded for your listening pleasure.
The link to our YouTube channel is also on our SoundCloud page if you can't figure it out.
Good luck!